The MHTTC is funded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, to enhance the capacity of the behavioral health and other related workforces to deliver evidence-based and empirically supported practices to individuals with mental illnesses. Please visit the MHTTC Network website for additional information at mhttcnetwork.org. Next slide, please. Following the webinar, you'll be asked to complete a brief survey. We value this feedback and use it to improve our activities and inform future activities. The surveys are also important because our continued funding is linked to the completion of these surveys. So we thank you in advance for your feedback. Next slide, please. We also want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our website along with the PowerPoint slides in the next couple of days. Next slide. We encourage you to interact with our presenters during the webinar by using the chat feature. Please post any comments or questions you have in the chat, and I will collect your questions as we go and ask them of the presenter during the Q&A time towards the end of the presentation. During the webinar, our presenter may pose questions to you, so please use the chat feature to answer those questions. Next slide. This presentation was prepared for the MHTTC network under a cooperative agreement from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. All material appearing in this presentation, except that taken directly from copyrighted sources, is in the public domain. It may be reproduced or copied without permission from SAMHSA or the authors. Citation of the source is appreciated. Please do not reproduce or distribute this presentation for a fee without the specific written authorization from the Northeastern Caribbean MHTTC. The opinions expressed herein are the views of the presenters and don't reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services, the HHS, or SAMHSA. No official support or endorsement of the HHS SAMHSA for the opinions described in this presentation is intended or should be inferred. Now let's begin our webinar. We have Ms. Christy Rybowski with us today. Ms. Rybowski joined the MHTTC team in 2020 as a school-based training and consultation specialist. Prior to joining the MHTTC team, she supported school teams with coaching, training, and technical assistance in the areas of social emotional learning, known as SEL, school mental health, and positive behavior interventions and supports. She brings more than 15 years of experience in implementing and maintaining evidence-based practices in a variety of settings. She is also passionate about improving the educational and social outcomes for urban communities. She has worked extensively in urban districts of Philadelphia and Newark, working within schools and partnering with many inner city grassroots, faith-based organizations, and local universities to align school-wide behavioral and mental health efforts within the local community. Welcome, Christy. Welcome, everyone. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Kadi. And I apologize to you guys that are kind of watching. I don't know what happened there, but technology is so unpredictable. So thank you so much for your patience and for your understanding. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Before we get started, I really wanted to take a moment just to thank Dr. Shaskia Brown for welcoming the MHTTC and myself into the Sparta school community, and to have the opportunity to be here with all of you today. It's been a pleasure to collaborate with you and the Sparta educators. So before we go ahead and kind of jump right into the content, I really wanted to take a moment to recognize how overwhelming and stressful the last year has been for all of us for so many different reasons. I think it's really important to acknowledge that parents have been under an enormous amount of stress and pressure. I don't know if any of you saw the recent article in the New York Times called "America's Mothers Are in Crisis." The article really highlighted how working parents have been stretched thin, especially mothers. One part of the article even said, the struggles of working parents and moms in particular have never been more in our faces. And yet this work, the planning, the multitasking often goes unnoticed. And so with that being said, I wanted to really just take a moment to commend you for all that you do and for being here with me today. I recognize that you could be anywhere else or doing 100 other things. And I say that because I am a parent myself, so I understand. So with that being said, I do think it's important for us to engage in a grounding exercise to really prepare our minds for tonight's session. So in order to get calm and relax and ready for today's activity, I wanted to do a quick 1 to 2 minute breathing exercise. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to play the video in a minute. When I play the video, it's going to be completely silent. So don't think that something's wrong with the webinar or something happened. What it's going to do is you'll actually see the shapes are growing. As the shapes grow, I want you to inhale, right? And as the shapes shrink, I want you to exhale. And we'll do that just for about 1 minute or so. All right, here we go. Let's inhale peace and exhale worry. Inhale peace. Exhale worry. Inhale peace. Exhale worry. Again, inhale peace. Exhale worry. Sometimes it's even helpful to put your finger on one nostril. Helps as well. Exhale worry. Inhale peace. Exhale worry. Inhale peace. And exhale worry. Nice job. So what we just participate in is what's called a grounding activity. Grounding strategies are really ways to help us reconnect with the present moment and kind of quiet any distressing thoughts that we may have. Grounding techniques are even built into our Apple Watches. I'm sure it's maybe one of those features you disabled, but it's actually really great that they embedded that grounding exercise even into the Apple Watch. I believe it's a circle that you'll begin to see. It's a reminder, right, for us to connect with the present moment. There's a ton of scientific research that proves taking deep breaths help us to relax the brain. So one of the best things we can do as parents is to really model the behavior that we want to see. And I'm sure many of us remember that old saying growing up, do as I say and not as I do. But unfortunately, that doesn't work. So the more we model healthy coping skills to deal with stress, the more our kids will learn how to deal with stress better. And one of the things we can do as parents is to be intentional about carving out time to identify how we cope with stress. So one great activity is to create a family grounding kit. You can certainly name this kit whatever you would like. For example, you can call it a calm kit or a cool down box. And as a family, come together and identify the things that help you feel relaxed, right? And so it could be a simple grounding exercise like we just did. You can actually even find those on YouTube. And it may just be writing those things down and putting them in the box, or you may actually want to put things in the box as well. And so what you'll see on my slide, there are some things that you can put in the box. So for example, stress balls or books or fidgets, maybe pictures of pets or music, stuffed animals. So type in the chat some things that you might want to put in your family grounding kit. What are some things that come to mind that you would like to put in your family grounding kit? Some things that help us feel calm and relaxed.
For Christy in the chat, we have someone saying essential oils like
Mhm.
lavender, stones,
Yes.
Play-Doh or silly putty,
Yes, yes, yep.
rain sticks,
Hmm.
music. I'm seeing that people are putting in things that invigorate our senses.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. These are all great things to include. This is also a great proactive strategy to use with kids who have ADHD or anxiety. I feel like, obviously everyone's anxiety has increased since the pandemic. So again, this is just a great proactive strategy that the family can do together. So as a parent being under an enormous amount of stress this past year, it's so easy for us to, or for our brains to naturally go to the negative, right? But I want us to really take a second, because I always like to have like a positive strength-based approach and really think about 1 to 2 positive qualities that your child possesses, right? We want to give our kids a major shout out right now. So think about 1 to 2 positive qualities that your child possesses. When you have those qualities, type your child's name into the chat and put what that positive quality is. And so while you're thinking about that, I'll go first because I am a parent. I know that wasn't in my bio, but I am a parent of a wonderful 13-year-old girl, and her name is Mackenzie. And I would say she is compassionate and caring. So I'll give folks a minute to type those things in. So positive qualities could be they manage time well, they get along with others well, they're flexible, well organized.
You see in the chat, someone wrote in Cole, who is kind, smart, and a problem solver.
Oh, I
Jacob,
love
who's
it.
compassionate and intelligent. Alex, sweet and caring. Julianne, passionate and organized. Bo, a happy demeanor and well organized. Austin, who has a great sense of humor and empathy. And Paula, who's smart and organized. Thank you.
Yes, I love those. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for sharing. So today, our workshop objectives, we are going to recognize the different types of motivation, explain some practical strategies to increase student motivation, and apply those practical strategies to a real life scenario. So please keep in mind that all the strategies that I'll review today will be, can easily be adaptive for younger and older students. I know we probably have a wide range of folks on the call who may have, you could have a child in your household who's in middle school or even one that's in high school, right? So for younger students, as a rule of thumb, we generally reduce the number of steps and replace written text with pictures. So just keep that in mind as we kind of go through the strategies this evening. So what is motivation, right? What drives us to get out of the bed in the morning for that 6 a.m. workout? I am so envious of those folks. What is it, right, that drives our behavior? Essentially, motivation is what drives us to action. It's the intrinsic interest in tasks that we find enjoyable and personally relevant. We are all motivated by different things. So I just want to take a moment and think about some things that actually motivate you, right? So think about the things that motivate you. I think, Kadi, this would be a great time to launch our poll. See what folks, see what things motivate the folks on our webinar this evening.
Okay, so on your screen, you will see a poll shortly. Please tell me if you cannot see it, or you can put in the chat box if you're having any difficulties.
Oh, I see responses coming in. Nice. I see them coming in. So these are just some general things, right, that motivate us as adults, right, like recognition. So it may be being recognized at work. We know that money is a motivator, right? Obviously, social interaction, especially right now. Oh, I love that. Oh, you guys are so awesome. Purpose right now is in the lead at 83%. Competition, I think we understand that as adults, how crucial it is to, identify what you feel like your purpose is in life. Feeling energized, it looks like it's about in second place at 56%. Thank you so much for participating. 42% was it brings you peace. It brings you peace. All right. So we generally group motivation into two different categories, one being intrinsic motivation and the other being extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation just means you have a desire to complete the activity because it feels good to you. It's personally rewarding. It comes from within. For example, some people enjoy reading because they feel like maybe it's an escape from reality. Reading can take you to a different place in time, right? Depending on the book. Extrinsic motivation means you are motivated to perform the task because it's attached to a reward or to avoid some form of punishment. So using that same reading example, some people may not enjoy reading, but they still like to attend book clubs. And that could be because the reward in attending is really the social interaction and connection with others. So both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation essentially drive human behavior and play a significant role in learning. And one is not necessarily better than the other. So for the purposes of today's workshop, we are going to focus on strategies we can use as parents to help motivate our children. We will explore each of these concepts in greater detail. One of them is providing choice. So essentially just providing students with the choice, will help create a sense of autonomy when it comes to learning. Progress monitoring or positive feedback, which is essentially providing praise. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Really focusing on more praise and less nagging, which can be hard for us to do as parents. Problem solving, right, is when things are hard. And we need to help our children think of alternative ways to essentially solve problems. So our first strategy that we're going to talk about is providing choice. Allowing for choice will let your child plan for learning in ways that are the most motivating. So providing choice not only increases their motivation and independence, but it also allows children to use and improve their communication and social skills. And I'll provide some additional concrete examples on the next slide. But here's just some rules of thumb, really when to use choice. Think about using it before transitioning to a new activity or task, before engaging in a less desirable or challenging activity. So for example, if you know that your child hates math, hates doing math homework, doesn't really enjoy that, providing choice may be helpful, and I'll provide some examples of what I mean shortly. And then choice should be purposely planned and implemented. So here are some choice-making opportunities broken down into a table. There's different types of choice-making opportunities. So between and among just really means what the child is going to work on. So you would provide choice. An example of that, it looks like, you could say, it looks like you have homework to complete for science, math, and reading. What would you rather work on first? So there's an example of providing choice in that context. Where is the location where the child will work or play? So for example, the choice may be around, do you want to do your work in your room, or would you like to come in the living room or do your work in the kitchen? When is the time that the child will begin to work or play? So the choice of when the activity starts, right? Do you want to start the activity now within 5 minutes or within 10 minutes? It's best to set a timer when using this choice-making opportunity and to allow the timer to kind of count down. It just helps avoid any power struggles with transitioning. Whom is with whom the child is going to play or maybe do work with. So who your child would like to complete the activity with. It may be, it may be mom, it may be dad, it may be an older sibling or even a peer. This is a great way to allow students to connect with one another, especially if it's a peer, despite our virtual world. Allow students to use like Google Meet or maybe even Zoom or even talk on the phone, right? And work together on certain assignments. Tangible is just specific items that the child needs either prior to or during or while they're completing their assignment. So keep in mind, some children actually work better with a fidget in hand, right? So we talked about some of those things to put in our grounding kit, our family grounding kit. And so I think some folks said, Play-Doh or fidgets. So keeping that in mind, allowing them to choose what tangible item will help them complete the task as well. So strategy 2 is providing feedback, and it is praise essentially. And I cannot stress this enough that praise is one of the easiest motivation strategies to implement, but the most underappreciated and underused. So children develop internal motivation through praise. If you really want to increase the likelihood that a behavior will occur again, we gotta praise. There have been thousands of studies done on praise used in education settings, workplace, and even with treatment foster care parents. Researchers will generally observe like the number of positive and negative statements, and then they will provide some simple feedback to the teacher or the manager or the parent around increasing praise statements. And they see an increase in student engagement and participation. And when we're talking about the workplace, they'll even see an increase in productivity. So oftentimes as adults, we provide, and this is something to really think about, oftentimes as adults, we provide inadvertent, right, reinforcement for doing the wrong thing. So for example, arguing with an adult gains children that adult attention, or calling out in class gains them peer attention, or being disruptive, right, gets them out of doing chores. So we must ensure that our kids receive ample reinforcement for the expected behaviors that we want to see, not just those inappropriate behaviors. So to really strengthen those behaviors we want to see, we have to praise. As a rule of thumb, just as something just to remember, you want to provide more praise statements than you do negative statements. So when we think about praise in terms of when to use it, we want to really use it as much as possible, right? We want to use it when your child's behavior matches your expectation of what you would like to see. We want to use it when your child is learning a new skill. And when you see a behavior that you would like to encourage. So we know that some punishment is necessary, right? And some parents resort to punishment or having penalties, but a more balanced approach is best, right? With an emphasis on the positives. So remember, punishment doesn't really tell children what to do. It only tells them what not to do. When we use punishment, we really run the risk of decreasing motivation, not increasing it. And while all praise is good, some praise is more impactful. And statements like great job and good girl don't really highlight the behavior. So the type of praise that we really want to focus on is behavior specific praise. And what that means is just that you're just naming the behavior that you would like to see again. So for example, one of the things that I've been working on with my daughter is making sure that she cleans up the kitchen after dinner. That is one of her chores, one of her responsibilities. When she does that, especially without me having to ask, right? I'm always praising her and saying, Mackenzie, you did a nice job cleaning up the kitchen tonight. So behavior specific praise really increases the likelihood that the behavior will occur again under those similar circumstances. So just some tips around praise: that it should be genuine and sincere. It should be behavior specific. I mentioned that already. And one thing to really keep in mind is that it should be delivered immediately after the behavior occurs, right? We don't want to wait, 10 minutes, an hour after we've actually observed that behavior. And once the behavior becomes intrinsically motivating, meaning, right, that that your child just kind of naturally does those things on their own, you can start to fade that praise over time. All right, so here are some praise statements. We have 4 up here on the screen that you should be able to see. So in the chat, identify what numbers reflect, right, the right type of praise statements we want to see. What numbers reflect the right type of praise statements we want to see? So is it numbers 1 and 3? Is it numbers 2 and 3? Is it all of them? What are the numbers? Go ahead,
In
I'm
the
sorry.
chat,
Mhm.
we have 2 and 3. A lot of people are responding 2 and 10, 2 and 3, and then 3.
Nice. Yep. So that's absolutely right. So 2 and 3 is correct, right? Because and the reason that it's right is because it's behavior specific. It says exactly that behavior that we want to increase and that behavior that we want to see again. Now, it's not to say that 1 and 4 is bad, right? I mean, it's certainly good. Great job. You did it. But again, if we want to increase the likelihood of seeing that positive behavior again and increasing that motivation, we have to make sure that praise is behavior specific. Strategy number 3 is problem solving. And we make decisions every single day. From the time that we wake up in the morning until now, I can guarantee you've probably solved about 6 or 7 problems. Some problems are easy, like deciding what to wear in the morning, and some problems are more complex. We know this all too well, especially after experiencing a global pandemic. If we give our kids the skills to effectively problem solve, we increase their motivation and resilience, right? So the earlier we can kind of teach this skill, the better. I've worked in many high schools, and this is one of the things students struggle with the most, partly because teenagers lack that cognitive problem solving skills. They lack those skills. Remember, the brain doesn't fully develop until age 25. In teen brains, the connections between like the emotional part of the brain and the decision-making center they're still developing. So the best thing that we can do as parents is really to help foster, what problem solving looks like. And again, here are just some suggestions on when to use problem solving. We can use problem solving when the task is too hard. I feel like, especially like my daughter is in middle school, and the work gets more and more challenging, right? We know this as parents. And sometimes the task can be overwhelming, especially if it's a project. You can use this when your child encounters even social challenges, right? So it may be a problem that happens between peers, and maybe, not getting along with friends. Or when looking for a solution. The other great thing about this strategy is this is something that can be done as a whole family, right? So even when you think about things that may impact the entire family, using this as a model for how you solve problems collectively and together. So even if it's, hey, dad got a new job and now we need to move, right? And so kind of going through the problem solving steps as a family. So I'm going to show you these steps next. So here are the problem solving steps. And again, I just want to make sure that I mention, you will receive all of this information as well. So you don't have to, take notes, or I probably should have mentioned that in the beginning. So my apologies. But we will make sure that you get all of this information so that way you can have it readily available and use this even tonight if you need to. So in terms of the problem solving steps, it's really giving your child opportunities to practice this when they aren't actively dealing with the problem, right? So even tonight, if you wanted to kind of make up the scenario and walk your child through those problem solving steps just to see how they will respond, opportunities to practice and model will only strengthen, right, their problem solving skills and prepare them for when, you know, an actual problem really does occur. You can apply, like I said before, the model in different situations. So if it's school, work, or home, problems with a sibling, we know that comes up very often. So in order for kids to really thrive in life, they need to develop these skills. We know as adults, difficulties and problems arise, right? And so keeping our children motivated really starts here. So you'll see the first step in the problem solving process is naming the situation and identifying what the problem is. So let's just say, for example, we'll say Jake, right? So Jake is failing biology. He currently has a 57 in the class, right? That's our problem. And so, you know, Jake has been very emotionally upset because, you know, he's not necessarily a straight A student, but he doesn't want to fail the course either. And so he comes to you, you know, very emotionally charged and angry, right? And so the first thing that we should do, and you know, the next thing that we should do in the problem solving step is really calm Jake, right? And this ties back to the family grounding activity we discussed earlier. So having your child use one of those, you know, use one of those strategies, right? And then the next step is to identify. So identify the outcome that Jake would actually like to see. So like I said, Jake isn't looking necessarily to get an A, right? He really is like, I just really need to pass this course. And so what we need to do is really help Jake brainstorm, right? And identify how he can accomplish this goal. So, you know, he's already in the fourth marking quarter. You know, one of the things that in terms of like this brainstorming step, or I'm sorry, I'm sorry, we got to back up a step, is when we're identifying, right, is like, okay, we know, have him really think about what he wants the outcome to be. So if it's like, I really want to get a B in this course, you know, but you know, like I said, he's teetering, he has a 57, so his average is pretty low. So the brainstorming step is really to kind of help Jake identify how he can accomplish his goal, right? So review the number of tests he has left to take, the number of assignments before the end of the marking period. You know, maybe, you know, some of the things that he should do is meet with his teacher, right? And see if there are any extra credit opportunities. See if the teacher may allow him to retake some of the exams. You know, so again, from there, it's just creating. So creating or writing down the plan that you discussed as part of your brainstorming session. And then from there, it's execution. So putting the plan in action. And then once the plan is in action, coming back to reflect on how did it go? How did it go? So one of the things to really remember when learning a new skill, especially when it comes to children, is that it takes on average 8 times to practice something, right, new before it actually becomes natural to us. So with all of these strategies, you know, you may try them tonight and like, oh man, it really wasn't impactful. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that fast, right? And so a lot of this really requires a lot of practice and repetition. So I think one thing to remember is, you know, as parents, is sometimes we really do have to be patient. We have to be patient when teaching these new skills. Just think about maybe when you were working with your child to, you know, learn how to ride a bike the first time, or, you know, learning how to tie their shoes, and right, the same thing still applies as they get older. It really does take repetition and practice. So strategy 4 is goal setting, and goal setting and problem solving really kind of do go hand in hand. But setting goals really reemphasizes the importance of planning. This skill becomes extremely important in late childhood, but it's important to kind of instill these practices as early as possible. For younger students, this should be more short term, right? So like 1 to 2 days. For middle or high school students, it should be about 1 to 2 weeks when we think about that goal setting. For younger students, you can still use this strategy. I think I mentioned that earlier on in the webinar, but instead of written text, you should consider using this activity, right? Or you can actually turn the activity into an arts and craft project or use pictures. So in terms of the goal setting, some things to keep in mind is setting the goals together, writing it down, kind of making a checklist of the series of steps that you need to take to accomplish those goals. And then, prompt prioritizing by asking questions, right? So what's one of the most important things you need to do to get this done? You've been spending about 20 minutes a night on your science project. What's the maximum amount of time you can spend each night without feeling overwhelmed? And so here's actually an example of a goal setting worksheet. If your child struggles with big tasks, you can break down those tasks into smaller steps and make them into a checklist. And I think I mentioned that before. So you'll see I have an example up here on the screen. You can fill in, a few goals. If that's overwhelming for your child, then I wouldn't recommend that, right? Especially if they're, if they're anxious. I would say maybe start off small and then you can build. But again, setting the goal. So for example, it says, finish reading the book for our social studies report. What steps do you need to take? Well, I need to read chapters 10 through 12 and kind of highlight those key points. Asking your child, how long do you think that's going to take you? Okay, so they may say, oh, I think it's going to take me about 2 hours. Obviously, you want to try to be realistic in that expectation. And then asking them, when do you think you would have it done by? Right. And then when it's complete, having them check off that they've completed it. And so when you really think about these strategies and some of them that I mentioned, we use these strategies as adults on a regular basis. I'm sure, as working parents, you may have a task list or a checklist of things that you need to do for home and for work. And so again, those are things that we just, as we got older, we realized that those strategies would help us. Maybe you learned it from another colleague, maybe somebody told you about a good strategy to kind of organize your work. But again, like I mentioned before, the earlier we, kind of give these skills or practice these skills with our children in advance, the more resilient they'll be and more motivated they'll be. So I know I provided a lot of strategies today. So I wanted to make sure that we kind of had a quick review. And so the first strategy that we went over was choice. Choice is basically allowing your child to plan for learning in ways that are most motivating for them, right? So you can use choice when your child is about to engage in a challenging or less desirable task. There are several, choice opportunities to select from we talked about. So the whom, the where, the when. The next strategy that we talked about was praise. Praise is one of the easiest motivation strategies to implement. But like I said before, it's the most underappreciated and underused. So if you want to really increase the behavior that you want to see, right, we got to make sure that we are providing that behavior specific praise. So as a rule of thumb, we talked about providing more praise than the number of corrections, right? The next topic that we discussed was problem solving. So think about this. Good problem solvers become great collaborators and leaders. So creating opportunities for practice when it comes to problem solving, even using this activity or skill as a family, and remembering to be patient as your child learns this new skill. And the last one that we just reviewed was goal setting, and setting goals that are short-term, right, specific, and moderately difficult. And then celebrating and rewarding even the smallest wins, especially now in this space, right, in this space that our children are in with the pandemic. So I have just one, and this is actually, I'm going to read the scenario, and then we have another poll that will launch. And so this scenario says, Emma is a 13-year-old girl who has always hated math. She often needs help completing homework assignments. It gets extremely frustrated when she can't solve problems. Last night, Emma was so frustrated. She screamed at her mother, "I can't do this stupid homework." So what strategy could we use to motivate Emma? What strategy could we use to motivate Emma? And I'm going to ask Kadi if you could launch the poll, and let's see what our audience says. So here are our strategies. I'll read the scenario again. So Emma is a 13-year-old girl who has always hated math. She often needs help completing homework assignments and gets extremely frustrated when she can't solve problems. Last night, Emma was so frustrated, she screamed at her mother, "I can't do this stupid homework." So yes, what strategy should we use? And I see our responses coming in. Nice.
It appears that most people are choosing problem solving in the group.
Yep. Yes, indeed.
In the chat, we have someone that says also problem solving.
Yep. Nice. Awesome. Thank you so much for participating. So, and you guys did an awesome job, and that's correct, right? Definitely problem solving would be a great strategy to use. But you know what, in reality, you know your child best, right? And so with these strategies, you may decide to start with one, right? You may decide to layer the strategies, right? So maybe with Emma, because she gets really, really frustrated when she has to do certain type of math problems, right? Maybe it's word problems that really frustrate her. And I know I didn't necessarily specify that in the scenario. So maybe when working with Emma and she's completing her assignment, we could say, "Hey, Emma, why don't we just start with the other problems, right? Why don't we start with the computation problems, and we can save the word problems for last." Right. And so giving her the choice to decide, she may say, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to start with the word problems and get them out the way." Okay. Right. So again, even if she does that, and she's successful and she's able to get through her homework without being frustrated, then we could use praise. Right. That's the perfect time to use praise. "Hey, Emma, you did a wonderful job completing your homework assignment today. I love how you didn't get frustrated. I know it was difficult, but you stuck with it and you did a great job." And then now that Emma, she's not upset, she's calm. Hey, you know what? Then we could actually go through the problem solving. We could go through the problem solving too. So again, all of these strategies can be very powerful and impactful, and can be used again when you feel it's best, right? When you feel it's best. So here are some just additional tips. One tip is just to be flexible. Things have been extremely challenging for all of us. And so I think being flexible right now with our kids and understanding, which I'm sure all of you are doing, obviously helps. One mistake though, that I know we make as parents, and I am guilty too, is to phrase our request in a question format. We'll say, "Isn't it time to get started on your homework?" Or, "When you like to get your homework done?" Oh my goodness, these are foolish questions, right? Unless you can accept no as an answer. So think about your statements like this. It's startup requests, right? So it's time to get started, or please start your homework now. The other thing we have to keep in mind is the nagging effect, right? Is when you have to ask your child to do the same thing over and over again. I'm telling you, it's a trap. And it's a very good manipulation strategy. So I would say, as a rule of thumb, only ask twice. After the second time, implement a pre-planned consequence. Okay, so it may be a small consequence, like, you may lose 5 minutes of being on the phone or 10 minutes being on the phone, depending obviously on what the situation is. I can't say this enough, but small rewards, right? So even as adults, we get rewarded, right? So think about when you are on a diet or you're working out, and how many of us have said, Friday is my cheat day, or the weekend is my cheat day. I'm going to reward myself with a slice of pizza, right? So that is basically the reward to yourself for eating healthy and working out all week. So just think about that too, even when, our children or your child is making progress. Think about those small rewards that you can provide to them as well. Okay, and Kati, I am going to turn it over to you, right, before we actually get into the question and answer. Just to let folks know where they can find us. And I don't know if this information is being dropped in the chat too.
Thank you, Christy. So as we mentioned before, we're now approaching our Q&A portion of our webinar. We did receive questions in advance during our registration, which I have them here, and I will ask Christy. Christy, do you want me to first put the Padlet link in?
Yes, that would be helpful. So I mentioned it, but I'll just say it again. So I know that it was a lot of information. So what I did was I created a Padlet. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but I'm sure most of us are familiar with Pinterest. It's just a virtual board where you can post everything from handouts to, PDF files to websites. And so what I did was I actually just created a Padlet that has all of the information that we talked about today. I even included some great books that may be helpful. I included the New York Times article I was referencing, right? So I included a bunch of things that I mentioned today.
Thank you. So if you would move the slide over to our QR code.
Sure, yep.
Okay, so as I present the questions to Christy at this time, if you could also take a moment to complete our survey, either using our QR code, and I will also email all the participants a survey link via email. But this, Christy, I'm going to begin with one of the questions that we were emailed, and it said, how to motivate a middle school and high school students to step away from the computer after school is over? How do you motivate engagement that doesn't include an electronic device?
Yes, oh my goodness, technology. I mean, not even just the phones nowadays. I mean, video games, that's such a great question. I definitely think that as parents, we have to be very intentional about creating what I like to call is like technology-free zones in your house. And so in my own home, and my daughter, she laughs at me, and she also kind of like rolls her eyes, but that's okay. And our technology-free zones are the bathroom, right? You do not need your cell phone in the bathroom. The kitchen and the dining room. So the dining room is obviously where we eat dinner. And I have like these little index cards where I have technology-free zone. I think that that's such a great way to really cut down on, the use of technology and really pulling them away from being glued to the computer or glued to their cell phones. The other thing is to think about setting aside times where you unplug as a whole family, right? And so that may be dinner time or an hour before bed. Another great strategy is, to decide on one location in the house at nighttime where you want all of your phones to charge, right? And so the phones aren't necessarily going into the bedroom. You can even turn this into like a friendly family competition. Let's see who can't, who can unplug for the longest. So the other thing I would say is that, we've gotten away from, scheduling family time and encouraging other activities as a family. So even sitting down and deciding on some things that, the family would like to do collectively and activities that they would like to engage in collectively. Like I said, my daughter laughs at me, but I am fast to pull out, the old board game Monopoly, let's play. So just again, being intentional about scheduling that family time and encouraging other activities.
Thank you. Those are all great ideas. Here's another question. When your child sees some assignment as low value or lacking purpose, how can you help them tap into intrinsic motivation to complete it?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. So I think sometimes we have to help our children, find the connection and link it to something that they may be passionate about or something that is practical. So, for example, let's say it's a math lesson on measurement, and your child is like, I have no interest in this. I'm not, or they're saying, this is too difficult. Think about, maybe having them in the kitchen with you while you're cooking and having them, measure out the ingredients. And, so that's a good way to kind of make the connection for them. So that way they can see how those things apply in the real world. So, and then sometimes, don't hesitate to connect with your child's teacher. I can't stress that enough. Like, the school and community partnership is so essential. And sometimes you can even ask the teacher, to see how flexible they will be and say, instead of this, would it be okay if, my child, created a PowerPoint presentation and presented it to the class? So those are just some strategies too that may be helpful when our kids kind of see it as low value or lacking purpose.
I see. So tapping into that creative aspect of it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. So I had another question submitted by a parent, and it's, probably something that many of you can relate to. How do you motivate teenagers to do anything?
I know. So one of the things I think I mentioned earlier on in the presentation is one of the reasons why teenagers lack that motivation is because, that the problem solving, portion of their brain is not necessarily fully developed just yet. And so I think it really goes back to that problem solving model that we talked about, right? Walking them through those steps, reinforcing those steps. The goal setting exercise is huge for teenagers. Looking at bigger goals and maybe even breaking them into smaller ones. And then tapping into things that your child is passionate about. And I know it's hard because as teenagers, they may shut down and not want to necessarily share those things with you. But I think that's why it's really important to make sure that our kids have great adults in their lives, right? That they can connect with, even if it's not us as parents. And so, connecting them with another adult and letting them, even necessarily have those conversations about what they're passionate about. Or even if what your child is passionate about, maybe connecting your child with an adult that's already in that field or already doing that work. So that's a really good strategy too.
Thank you. And then we have another one that says, how do you help your child work hard during virtual learning?
I know we kind of talked about this a little bit, but I think it really goes back to the goals that I was that the goal exercise that I was talking about, right? And breaking down those goals. So looking at larger goals and breaking them down into smaller ones. And like I said, you may want to even start small and, maybe you just start with one goal. And, once they accomplish that goal, make a big deal about it, right? Like make a big deal about it. That's what's really nice about the rewards is like you can tie the rewards to the goal. And when they accomplish that goal, celebrating their success in that.
Absolutely. So breaking down some goal that might seem monumentous and large in the moment and breaking it down to smaller goals and even
Yes.
pacing yourself. We'll only do this today and then not to avoid the overwhelm. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a question and then in the chat box that says, what strategies do you recommend for an 8-year-old for virtual learning at home? So someone a little bit younger. And if the participant can, what's the specifics of the question? Like what, in terms of what is the difficulty? And I think it's Miss Feng. Maybe she can clarify in the chat box. While I get more clarification on the question, here's the last question from the ones that were submitted in registration. How can I deal with additional challenges that come about with ADHD or anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, especially with anxiety, developing those healthy coping skills before, right, before your child is actually triggered with that anxiety, right? So, preparing them as much as possible by talking with them about what to expect, so what's to come. I think that's really important. The other thing that could be really helpful too, and I've seen actually be really impactful, and this is actually some of my work that I've done in hospitals, is suggesting your child use a scale from 1 to 10. You can even print these offline, or you can easily write it on an index card, and have them measure their anxiety. I think that's really powerful too, because once you have them measure their anxiety on a scale of 1 to 10, you can then ask them, okay, well, what's making you feel anxious right now? And you'll be able to see what is causing the anxiety, right? You may be able to see, man, the last couple of times, right, you use this scale, you've marked it as a 10, and that was right before you were about to take a test. Now we've identified, right, what's triggering the anxiety. Once we identify what's triggering, right, we can actually put some coping strategies in place. Or like I said, communication is key between the teacher and at home, and sharing that also with the teacher. Maybe there's some additional things that the teacher can do to kind of help support in that anxiety, which I feel like a lot of educators are mindful of that, especially now. Our students with ADHD, like I said, and I mentioned this before, and on the Padlet, I put a resource that references ADHD. Remember that allowing them to have a fidget, right, or something tangible, or maybe even listening to music, actually helps them concentrate better.
Yes, thank you. I don't have any other questions. We do have a few minutes left. If
I have one other thing, Kadi, that I just wanted to let folks know that this is like a series that the district is offering and has partnered with the MHTTC, which is so amazing, and we're so happy to do that. So the next upcoming workshop is actually next Wednesday, March. Is it the 3rd or is it the 4th? Did I get that date wrong again? And it's from 4 to 5:15. Same time. And during that time, we're going to be talking about social emotional learning at home and in the community, and emotions matter. This is the topic that I am incredibly passionate about, is SEL. So social emotional learning, we say SEL. I'm sure that you've heard that terminology a lot, especially now. And so, you know, again, we'll be kind of diving a little bit deeper into that topic. And then the last session, my colleague is actually going to present and talk to all of you around creating resilience in children that will foster their potential and increase their success in the world. And that is scheduled for Wednesday, March the 10th between 4 and 5:15 as well. And now, Kadi, can you just remind folks about how they'll receive a separate link though, correct? An
Yes.
email? Okay.
Yes, so everyone who has registered on our Eventbrite will and have indicated that they'd like to attend, all three will receive, or this particular one on Wednesday, March 3rd, will receive a Zoom link in advance. So I just wanted to let everyone know they will be registered automatically onto the Zoom. The only time that doesn't happen is if it's really close to the webinar time and I don't have time to import the registration. And at that time, I do send out the Zoom registration link, but this is done automatically well in advance. Christy, we do have one last question in the chat.
Sure.
It's from a participant. These strategies put a lot of efforts on the parent to navigate them. At what age or at what point do we start to see our child develop these behaviors without us having to activate it in themselves? And I guess in a way, increasing more independence.
I mean, I would say we start to see a little bit of that independence in the middle school, right? In middle school years. But again, keep in mind that, you know, no two children are the same. Right. And so you may have one child who, and I'm sure you may even recognize this even with your own children, right? If you have more than one, is that one may be more independent and more self-driven and more, you know, intrinsically motivated, right? To do the work and get things done. They may be a go-getter, right? And another child may not be, right? They may be more laid back. They may need more of that extrinsic motivation. So every child is really different. But I would say in middle school, we do start to see a lot of that, you know, taking ownership, right? Taking ownership. But again, I think as parents, it is very important for us to, and it is, right? Parenting is, man, it is a full-time job by itself. So trust me, I understand. But, you know, like I said, I think it's important to have these strategies in your back pocket, right? And use them, you know, and kind of use those proactive strategies. And if we don't have those proactive strategies, it's natural for us to resort to, right, frustration or, you know, especially now. So I would say, again, you know, in those books that I've talked about too, what's really nice is that they have like these little surveys that you can take to kind of measure to see where you think your child is in certain areas. So like executive functioning and things like that. And, you know, so that there's another way too. You could easily see kind of where your child is and determine what supports they need, what supports they may need.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Christy. So it appears that we don't have any more questions submitted at this time in the chat box. Again, I want to thank everyone for your participation, your active participation, and you know, for your time today. We understand that during this very difficult and challenging time, you know, time is a valuable and precious resource. So if you have any questions for us, Christy, in the chat box, if you could put your email, I will put my email in. And if you need to reach out to us, if you have any questions or concerns, we will email everyone a link to our evaluation survey. I also included in the chat box, and also our presenter slides and the recording when it becomes available.
Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. I hope you found it helpful, and I hope that we'll see you next week, where we'll, you know, spend some time talking about SEL, social emotional learning.
Yes, we hope you join us next week. So with that said, we hope everyone has a good evening and stay safe and well.